Right, good morning. My name is Simon Brind. My pronouns are he, him. I am a 50-something white man with a shaved head and a goatee beard. I'm dressed in black and wearing a hoodie with a logo which reads Avalon Larp Studio, which is useful because that's the organization that I'm a part of. Avalon Larp Studio is a not-for-profit collective headquartered in Oslo, Norway, but we're spread out across various countries, and I'm based here in London. I am a LARP writer, designer, and academic. So I'm here to talk about some aspects of LARP, live-action role-playing games. I'm hoping that most of you no longer need a definition of LARP, but just to be on the safe side, if tabletop role-playing games are experiences where players take on the role of a character inside a game world, and in response to a fictional scenario, they describe their character's action, LARP extends this by replacing the description of that action with actually carrying out the action via embodied and physical roleplay. In LARP, the participants pretend to be their characters, speaking, moving, and interacting as them within the story world. I use this term story world because I think I've heard it elsewhere in a wider context. It's quite an accessible term in terms of meaning. The story world is the temporary fictional reality of an immersive event, as distinct from the life world where we spend the rest of our time, illustrated here by two images of the same woman, one armored and ready for battle, taken by Rechographia, and the other a selfie taken in her workplace. The image I'm showing now shows a person with a t-shirt over their head acting as a blindfold. Their arms are cuffed behind their back, and they are leaning uncomfortably against the wall of some partially ruined office space. Behind them, a soldier in uniform stands ominously. It is dark outside, and the light from the exterior of the windows looks like something is on fire. This is an unstaged photograph from the 2018 LARP, The Quota, taken by Oliver Facey. We're getting to the point, I think, where the immersive industry at large is already aware of LARP, particularly Nordic LARP, and is either trying to make sense of it, is interested in some of the ideas that we've developed, or has started to adopt or reuse LARP concepts for their own practice. So this is possibly the last time one of the LARP community can stand here and talk to you about what we have to offer as though it's some kind of secret. I know that Will and Carolina came to speak here, and Alessandro from Chaos League, and before that it was actually me. Right, so today I'm going to talk about what I think are the key differences between LARPs and other immersive forms, and about some of the ideas that we work with, specifically Alibi and Agency, and I will also talk a little bit about Bleed, because all of these ideas are connected. There will be time for questions at the end, and I'll be around all day if people want to talk further. So this Creative Commons image is of Tinkerbell at Pixie Hollow in Disneyland. I want to start by saying that I am a massive fan of immersive events. I love a good escape room. I am that repeat visitor to an immersive theatre event. I'm longing for that day when my kid is old enough to enjoy a proper scare attraction. Immersive drinking or dining? Yes, please. And I will unironically cry at the Disneyland closing fireworks when Tinkerbell flies overhead. I say that up front because when I'm talking about LARP, it might sound like I'm rejecting all other forms of immersion or somehow suggesting that LARP is better. And when I say up front, that's not my intention and it's not my belief. This is the photograph that I chose to go into the program for this event. I acknowledge that this is not a professional head and shoulders portrait shot. Back in the autumn of 2019, I started to grow a beard. I wanted it long enough to go into plaits. I grew this beard because I was due to play a Viking Age LARP, and I wanted facial hair to match the setting. It took 7 months to grow. And then, of course, lockdown happened and the event was cancelled, and so I shaved off the beard. In the autumn of 2021, I grew the beard again. And eventually I got to play the LARP in 2022. But in the end, I spent over a year growing a beard which did not suit me, and which most of my family, all of my family hated for an immersive event that lasted for 3 days. And then I shaved it off again. I did this because I am a LARPer. So what I'm going to do over the next 15 minutes or so is to talk about a few LARP terms that I think increasingly this audience is becoming familiar with, but try to unpack them a little bit more for you, and we can use that as the basis for the Q&A at the end. I'll start by talking about the terms immersion and immersive, because I think they have subtle differences in meaning, depending on where you stand in the immersive landscape. LARPs are not shows. They do not generally have an audience. And a LARP may be supported or enhanced by being in an immersive setting, but for LARPers, immersion is a participatory act. A LARPer's suspension of disbelief is an active adoption of a belief in the reality of the story world and the people within it. LARPs function best when the participants extend their belief to encompass and support the story worlds of their co-players. We call this interimmersion. It's like a hive mind. It acts as an amplifier, a feedback loop for shared belief. LARPers will often spend a lot of time, money, and energy preparing for an event. I've talked about me spending a year growing a beard, but let me develop the idea with a few more photographs and some words about costuming. Some more photos by Oliver Facey coming up. These are from the International LARP, A Meeting of Monarchs. This picture shows 5 women in Tudor-era clothing standing on the steps of a castle. I'm going to show a closer view of the middle outfit worn by Queen Claude of France. So for this dress, the 4 sleeves are made of gold brocade. The main dress is a silk cotton blend and decorated with cutouts, dozens of red, white, and silver pearls of different sizes, gold rings, brocade ties with braiding, pearls, smocking, and different gold ribbons and decorative stitches. There is no visible machine stitching in this dress. I checked in with Veronica Stangl, the player who made and wore this dress, and she said it took well over 100 hours to create it, and probably as much again spent on the historical research that went into designing the outfit. Another person, Anna Blaschka, spent many days working on the bodice chain and the necklace. LARP designers sometimes make significant demands of our players in terms of engagement, preparation, and participation, not just in terms of costuming, but in terms of the physical and emotional effort required to play the game. And the players also make significant demands on themselves, because LARPs are not really a consumer product. LARPs are co-created. Now, I mentioned Queen Claude of France a moment ago, so I've added a second image, a 16th century painting of Queen Claude by Corneille de Lyon, to show the real person and the player side by side, or if you prefer, the real person and the character that they play. Because one of the key differentiators of LARP is that participants have a character who is present in the story world. Remember, we ask the players to move and speak and behave like their characters. You can think of this as being like acting, but the discussion about where the intersection between acting and LARPing is outside of the scope of this talk. This process is a part of the interimmersion. Breaking character is frowned upon because it affects the immersion and experience of the other participants. We know that bodies are genetically responsive to their environments. And as LARP is an embodied form of roleplay, which relies upon the player's body to move through the story world, unlike a digital game, VR, or traditional theatre audience, this means that because they share the body with the character, in a LARP, the participant's body is biologically present in the story world. So that's the participant's body biologically present in the story world. At its simplest, this could mean that if the location is cold, the character and participant may be cold, But it can also mean that events that take place during the LARP seem to be more real, even when they're not. A player whose character is being chased through the woods may experience an adrenaline rush as though they, the player, were being chased. Of course, we would experience a similar adrenaline rush in a scare attraction, but the narrative consequences of being caught by the monster in a LARP are real for the character. Conversely, two players whose characters fall in love may experience something akin to grief as the LARP ends and their fictional relationship is revealed as transitory. Or a player may feel actual grief over the death of a character. This is the magic term bleed that Nordic LARPers get excited about, a transfer of usually emotion, but sometimes thoughts or memories, between character and player, or vice versa. This image was taken by Tris Katalska. It shows a woman in her 30s with red flowers in her hair. She is wearing a white dress. It is from the 19th century American style. The woman, in my eyes, looks supremely angry. She is walking down the street of a Wild West town. In her right hand, partially concealed by the lace of her dress, is a 6-shooter pistol. Her left hand is clenched into a fist. Behind her on the street, lying in the dirt, are 2 bodies. This is from the Westworld-inspired LARP Conscience, made by Not Only LARP in Spain. The character, Jeanette Skinner, believed that she was the madam of the brothel in the town of Mayfield. In fact, she is a robotic host, an artificial life form created for the pleasure and entertainment of visiting guests to the Conscience theme park. She and her staff have been abused and murdered by these visitors over and over again. Each day, their memories were wiped and the damage done to them was repaired. This photo was taken a short while after the hosts became sentient. All of their memories of everything that had been done to them were restored, and the security system that prevented them from doing harm to the human guests had failed, as shown by the bodies lying in the dirt behind her. You are not looking at an actor, nor an NPC. This is a player on the 3rd day of a LARP. Indeed, the bodies lying in the dirt are also those of players. I should say something quickly about the duration of a LARP. There are many that only take a few hours to set up and play, but quite a lot of the bigger games run for 2 or 3 days or longer. These are the before and after photos from a LARP called The Solution, and the gap between the 2 images was 46 hours. The longer duration gives us flexibility to spend time with our participants, teaching them how to play the game, facilitating sessions where they can calibrate their experience with the other participants, and to work on safety and escalation and de-escalation mechanics. There is also an effect that long-form improvisational actors talk about. 12, 15 hours into an experience, something strange happens to our relationship with the story. I think perhaps as players, we get tired of trying to hold the life world and the story world in our head at the same time. It's simply easier to be the character. So this degree and duration of immersion offers a number of interesting effects. So whilst the character and the player might share the same body, they are distinct and often very different in terms of temperament and behavior. But what we have discovered is that embodied role play can enable players to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. We describe this as alibi. Alibi describes the different social rules of a LARP, which enable the participant to play the character, and specifically to do those things they would not normally do in real life. Because the action of a LARP is directed at the character, not the participant, a shy person may be happy to engage in an escalated argument and feel actual rage or fear, but with the subliminal knowledge that they can step away. I'm showing an image of a bottle of laudanum, a stack of Swiss coins from 1816, 2 wooden dice, and a bowl of leeches. These were taken a few weeks ago at Avalon's production of Gothic, a LARP where the players took on the role of famous poets and writers such as Mary Shelley and Lord Byron. They spent 2 days playing out a drug-fueled nightmare. And these fictional layers of alibi were designed to allow them to play in quite extreme ways. Behavior that would not be acceptable in the life world is permitted by the alibi of story world. An immersed participant with alibi may see their character take part in a physically intimate scene or portray an act of violence that they would not normally countenance, such as sleeping with their half-sister or shooting 2 people dead on the street of a Western town. Whilst alibi is often used to describe an opportunity to transgress, there is more nuance to this concept. Having a character with associated alibi allows the participant to take part in the story. The character's presence insulates them from blame or harm or any embarrassment that might arise from identity-incongruent actions. The player can take their character down a tragic path. They can make an objectively bad decision for the sake of additional drama. They can try to win, or they can choose to lose. This is agency. In its simplest form, agency describes the ability of a participant to materially affect the events of the story world because of something the character does or chooses not to do. I am not suggesting that agency doesn't exist in other immersive forms, but it is at the very core of LARPing. Given that there are often no actors to control the story, even LARPs that offer limited levels of agency may still find that players do unexpected things. So this image is from the largest LARP in the UK, Empire, which has around 4,000 players. It's another photograph by Oliver Facey. It shows a small group of players standing in the dark, watching a horde of other players, hundreds of them, walking past with flaming torches. We cannot treat players like actors and expect them to interact in the story world in the way that we as designers envisage. It is rare, in fact, for LARPers to do what the designer wants them to. Whilst the story can be railroaded, this often leads to frustration and hard feelings. So that the narrative agency of players seems to be in direct opposition to dramaturgy. This leads to, or can lead to, narrative crisis, moments where the path of the story changes in ways that were not predicted by the organizers. But we don't believe that is a bad thing. This image is from a LARP called Blood's Band Reloaded, taken by Sabina Sonning. It is of a man in post-apocalyptic armor sitting behind the wheel of the shell of a car that appears to be like something out of the Mad Max franchise. LARPers can also make smaller decisions, things that don't necessarily change the story for everyone else, but can lead to their character going down interesting or unexpected pathways. Sometimes this is a conscious decision, and we call it steering. Steering happens when a player decides to take their character in a specific direction rather than following the flow of the story. And in doing so, they are taking an active role in the story-making process. Some LARPs also use a system of calibration to allow steering between players. Calibration is a form of participant agency, a set of agreed meta techniques that allow players to request an increase or demand a dialing down of the intensity of an interaction between their characters and the characters of other players. This image shows a fire ritual taking place in a stone circle near to some trees. It is night, and the area is surrounded by mist or smoke. In the center of the image, a dancer conjures a ring of sparks and flames around herself. Other figures in the background carry flaming torches. LARPs are machines for making immersive stories. As LARP designers, we make these machines, we create the story world and sometimes the characters in it, but we do not control the output. The stories that the machine generates are created by the players. Our participants interact with the machine in ways that often mirror the behaviors of immersive audiences, but as we give people characters, we also have the variables of alibi, an agency to play with, and the effects of bleed to be aware of and designed for. While these may exist in other forms, we believe that Larp has pushed the sliders a long way up. It has been evolving on its own since the 1980s, without funding and honestly with very little commercial success. But this has enabled it to make mistakes, to take risks, and to experiment in ways that may not have been possible if driven by economic interests. It has a high barrier to entry because it relies on active participants collectively buying into an intersubjective story world. Now, the Nordic Larp community particularly doesn't want these things to be secrets. Many of us are keen to collaborate, to share concepts like these, and to talk to you, because you have spaces and ideas and budgets and skills that we can scarcely dream of. In parallel, we might have solved some of the issues that you are wrestling with, possibly in terms of safety and calibration, but particularly in the fields of participatory and transformational storytelling, and in long-form experiences, and of course, player agency. I think I'll leave it there because we need to have a short time for questions at the end, but I just want to say very quickly thank you to the various photographers who have let me include their work in this deck. They are all credited in this slide. Thank you very much. And now the challenge of it. If there are any questions, I think there is a microphone going around. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love it if you could talk a bit more about what safety tools you use. Like you mentioned calibration. I'm a performer who's, if anyone is aware of living history at East 15, I've been through that infamous exercise. And yeah, I'm really interested in like how you, especially with psychological safety with performers, kind of work with that and going through quite traumatic experiences, letting go of characters.
So there's a lot of different questions there. Let me talk about the calibration piece first, because I think this is super interesting, and it's something that has allowed LARPs to go to places that, on first glance, people might be uncomfortable with. The key thing here is the workshopping. We have time before the LARP and after the LARP to talk about what's going to happen and what has happened, and to teach and practice what we call meta techniques, a way of signaling outside of the fiction that you want to do something. I'll give you a very good example. In the LARPs that we run, if you want to request to a co-player that they turn up the intensity of what they're doing, that could be they were shouting at you, but you actually want them to throw you up against the wall and scream in your face. It could be that they were kissing the back of your hand, but actually you're more comfortable, you would be comfortable with something even more intimate than that. You would say to them, "Is that all you've got?" Or, "Is that all you've got?" There's a non-verbal way of signaling it as well, which is to scratch them lightly. Now, that is an invitation to escalate. They might not want to. They might say, actually, kissing the back of your hand is fine. Yeah. But if you've given them the invitation, they can take it and they can escalate slowly from there. The converse of that, the instruction lay off or tapping somebody twice, that's not an invitation. That's an instruction. If somebody taps you out, you dial it down. We also have the ability to stop a scene, to stop play at any point. There are various words for that. We tend to use off game. Off game, I need to leave. Now, those techniques, if they are practiced with a group, and you know that everybody in the room who's involved in this experience has been given the same information as you've had a chance to collectively try it out. Yes, it relies on trust, of course it does. All of these things do. But it has really enabled some things to happen that I'm not willing to talk about on this stage.
And then you mentioned that you have like a sort of cool down time afterwards.
Yes, so there are sometimes formal structured debrief sessions where people will have an opportunity to talk about the experience, to distance themselves from the character in some cases. So that's a sort of decompression with co-players. Not everybody likes it, but I think for a very intense experience, dramatic or LARP, I think it's super useful. So, yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, I was interested in when you design a LARP or write it, how do you go about that, when you cannot control the outcome and you...
So there's two questions there. The first one is about how we go about designing and writing LARPs, and I'm glad you've asked it, because I have another slide here. There's the Nordic LARP community has written about what it does and how it does things extensively for the last 25 years. I think there are probably some people in the room who know the big pink book, but this book on LARP design is available for free as a PDF. You can, written by LARP designers from, I think, 14 different countries. That talks in detail about the process of LARP design, safety design, and everything else. The other piece of the puzzle, which is about stories and how we design for that. If you have a largely homogeneous audience, by which I mean they're from one country or culture, they tend to follow well-understood patterns. If there's a trope, people will go, I know how to do this, and that is the path they will go down. So you can provide some guidance and some structure. For some LARPs, we will say, this LARP ends in tragedy. Don't mind how you get there, but everybody dies in Act 3. And that also works. The challenge is when you have large LARPs with hundreds of players from different cultures and communities who all think they understand the tropes. And then that's when you can get some tension. Can you design around it? Yes, but I think you have to make the mistakes first, which is something which LARP's had some practice on. So I can't answer that question in the 1 minute remaining, but I think there should be some stuff in there that will help.
Hi, we're looking at using like a LARP kind of essence in an escape room for the choose what you want, the character. How long would you say it takes to get into that kind of, you said 12 to 15 hours to fully embrace the game world. How quick do you think you could do it? And is there things you could do to encourage it?
To get to the stage where you lose touch of holding two worlds at the same time, 12 to 15 hours, to get into character, it can be super quick, particularly if that character is one that is understood. If you were playing with well-known IP, for example, if you said, right, you're a character from the Harry Potter world, people will pick that up super quickly. So 10, 15 minutes at most, and some people will just do it like that. I don't think that's a detailed enough answer to give you, and maybe we can catch up afterwards, because I appreciate that we are out of time, and it probably deserves more than...
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks. I think we're out of time now, so thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.